There are places in this world that defy logic, cities built not to be found, not to be remembered, but to vanish without a trace. Picture a settlement hidden so perfectly in the folds of time and terrain that even the most relentless seekers return empty-handed, their maps blank and their curiosity unquenched. This is the paradox of the city designed to never be found, a concept that blurs the line between legend and reality. For centuries, these elusive places have haunted the imaginations of explorers, historians, and dreamers alike. They whisper to us from the edges of ancient texts and the fading memories of travelers, promising answers to questions we've only begun to ask. What drives a society to construct something only to erase all traces of its existence? The answer lies in the delicate dance between human ingenuity and primal fear. These cities weren't just hidden, they were engineered to disappear, woven into the fabric of their surroundings so seamlessly that nature itself became their guardian. From the impenetrable jungles of South America, where vines swallow stone, to the shifting sands of the Middle East, where entire civilizations are buried beneath the dunes, these places challenge everything we think we know about history. They force us to confront the limits of our knowledge and the enduring power of myth. But this isn't just a story about lost cities. It's about the people who built them, the secrets they sought to protect, and the lengths they went to ensure those secrets would never be uncovered. It's about the thrill of the hunt and the frustration of the dead end, the tantalizing clues that lead nowhere and the discoveries that rewrite history. As we peel back the layers of these enigmatic places, we'll uncover not just stone and mortar, but the hopes, fears, and ambitions of those who walked these hidden streets long before us. So settle in, because by the end of this journey, you'll never look at a map the same way again. The world is far stranger and far more mysterious than it seems. The legend of El Dorado begins not with a city, but with a man, a ruler so rich, his people would cover him in gold dust during sacred ceremonies, washing the precious metal into a lake as an offering to the gods. This ritual, practiced by the Muisca people of modern-day Colombia, became twisted over time into a fantastical tale of an entire city paved with gold. When Spanish conquistadors heard whispers of this golden one, their hunger for wealth transformed a cultural tradition into an obsession. Men like Gonzalo Pizarro marched thousands into uncharted jungles, driven by visions of untold riches. Yet the harder they searched, the more El Dorado seemed to retreat into the mist, leaving behind trails of broken men and empty promises. Here lies the cruel irony of the legend. The Muisca never spoke of a hidden city. The true El Dorado was a person, a ceremony, a moment in time. But the conqueror's greed reshaped the story into something grander, something eternal. They chased a mirage of their own making, projecting their desires onto an unfamiliar culture. With each failed expedition, the myth grew larger, fed by desperation and imagination. Jungles swallowed entire armies, yet the dream persisted, passed down like a fever from one generation of seekers to the next. What makes this legend endure isn't the gold, but the lesson it carries. El Dorado became a mirror, reflecting the darkest parts of human nature, our capacity for self-destruction in pursuit of the impossible. The Spanish didn't just misinterpret a ritual, they revealed how easily ambition can blur into delusion. Even today, the name lingers as shorthand for any unreachable prize, proof that some treasures aren't meant to be found. Perhaps the real gold was never in the ground, but in the wisdom the Muisca tried to share. That true value isn't measured in what we take, but in what we're willing to give away. Percy Fawcett saw what others couldn't or wouldn't believe. a British explorer hardened by years mapping South America's uncharted frontiers. He became obsessed with whispers of an ancient metropolis hidden in the Amazon's green labyrinth. Unlike El Dorado's golden fantasies, Fawcett's city of Z wasn't a treasure hunter's dream, but a scholar's conviction. He pored over colonial archives, piecing together accounts of stone roads and towering ruins glimpsed by missionaries and rubber tappers. To him, these fragments painted an undeniable truth. The Amazon wasn't a pristine wilderness, but the graveyard of a lost civilization. His contemporaries scoffed. The jungle, they insisted, was too harsh, too untamed to cradle a complex society. But Fawcett knew better. He'd watched vines strangle temples in Sri Lanka, seen how nature could reclaim even the grandest works of man. The Amazon's hostility wasn't proof of Z's absence. It was the very reason the city remained hidden. Indigenous tribes spoke of ancestors who built then vanished, leaving behind only stories. Fawcett wondered, what if those stories weren't myths but memories? In 1925, he vanished into the rainforest with his son and a single companion, convinced he was close. Their final letters crackled with certainty. They'd found traces of Z's builders. Then, silence. Search parties found only rumors, a compass in a tribal chief's possession, tales of white men wandering skeletal and fever-crazed. Fawcett's disappearance became the ultimate paradox. By failing to find Z, he ensured its legend would outlive him. Modern archaeology has since vindicated his intuition. Satellite imagery reveals geometric earthworks spanning thousands of miles, proof the Amazon once teemed with settlements. Yet Z itself remains elusive, if it ever existed at all. Perhaps that's the point. Fawcett's quest mirrors our own uneasy relationship with the unknown. We crave discovery, yet fear what might be lost when every blank spot on the map is filled. The city of Z endures not as a place but as a question. How much mystery are we willing to preserve? High in the thin air of the Himalayas, where snow-capped peaks brush the heavens, there exists a legend of a valley untouched by time. Shangri-La isn't just a hidden city, it's an idea, a sanctuary where suffering and strife have no place, where the air hums with tranquility, and where no one grows old. James Hilton's novel Lost Horizon painted this paradise in vivid strokes, but the myth runs far deeper than fiction. For centuries, Tibetan monks whispered of secluded monasteries where enlightened souls lived undisturbed by the world's turmoil. The paradox here is achingly beautiful, a place so perfect that revealing it would destroy its very essence. What makes Shangri-La endure isn't just its promise of escape, but the way it taunts us with the impossible. Explorers have combed the Himalayas for its physical location, pointing to remote valleys like Hunza in Pakistan or the hidden kingdom of Bhutan as possible candidates. Yet every supposed discovery falls short because Shangri-La was never meant to be found. It thrives in the space between reality and yearning, a reflection of our deepest desire to step outside of time, to find a corner of the world unspoiled by greed or conflict. The genius of this myth lies in its duality. On one hand, it's a warning, a reminder that perfection, once grasped, ceases to exist. The moment Shangri-La is mapped, photographed, or visited by crowds, it becomes just another destination. On the other hand, it's a testament to human resilience. In the face of wars, plagues, and the relentless march of progress, we keep dreaming of a haven where none of it matters. Tibetan Buddhists might call it Shambhala, a spiritual kingdom that reveals itself only when the world is ready. But perhaps the real magic of Shangri-La is that it allows us to carry a piece of it within us, a private refuge no map can ever trace. Modern life, with its constant noise and demands, only sharpens this longing. We flock to meditation retreats, off-grid cabins, and digital detoxes, chasing fragments of the peace Shangri-La symbolizes. Yet the harder we search outside ourselves, the more we realize the truth hidden in the myth. The most unshakable sanctuary isn't a place but a state of mind. The Himalayas guard their secrets well, but the greatest mystery isn't whether Shangri-La exists, it's why we still need to believe it does. The story of Atlantis begins not with an archaeologist's trowel or a diver's discovery, but with the words of a philosopher written 2,400 years ago. Plato described an island empire beyond the Pillars of Hercules, a civilization of unmatched sophistication and military might, blessed with concentric rings of canals and glittering temples. Yet its people grew arrogant, their hearts heavy with greed, until the gods punished them in a single cataclysmic night, sending Atlantis beneath the waves, lost forever. What's fascinating isn't just the tale itself, but how it's echoed through centuries, morphing from moral fable to obsession. Unlike Shangri-La's peaceful mystique or El Dorado's golden mirage, Atlantis strikes a chord because it feels eerily plausible. Plato framed it as history, not myth, claiming his ancestor Solon heard the story from Egyptian priests. This tiny detail has fueled endless speculation. Was Atlantis a real place, its fate distorted by time? Or did Plato invent it as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power? The debate reveals more about us than the lost city itself. Every generation maps Atlantis onto its own anxieties, whether it's Victorian scholars linking it to ancient Thera's volcanic collapse or modern theorists imagining it as a hub of alien technology. The locations proposed are as varied as they are improbable. Some point to the sunken ruins near the Azores, while others insist it's Antarctica's ice-bound secrets or even the eye of the Sahara's strange geological formations. But the most compelling theory isn't about geography, it's about psychology. Atlantis endures because it embodies our deepest fear, that progress and pride can undo us. In an age of rising seas and crumbling empires, Plato's warning feels less like ancient history and more like prophecy. Perhaps the real power of Atlantis lies in its impossibility. The lack of evidence doesn't weaken the legend, it strengthens it. A city found would just be another ruin, but a city forever lost, that becomes a mirror, reflecting whatever we project onto it. Whether as a sunken utopia or a parable of collapse, Atlantis challenges us to wonder how much of our own civilization might one day fade into myth, leaving behind only stories to puzzle the people who come after. Rising from the Sri Lankan jungle like a stone sentinel, Sigeria is a masterpiece of defiance. This towering rock fortress, crowned with the ruins of a 5th century palace, wasn't just built to impress, it was designed to defy. King Kashyapa, a ruler haunted by betrayal and paranoia, chose this 200-meter monolith as his stronghold, carving staircases into sheer cliffs and painting its walls with ethereal frescoes. The result, a fortress so secure it became a prison. The very isolation that made Sigeria unconquerable also sealed its fate, a lesson etched in stone about the fragility of power. What's astonishing isn't just the scale of Kashyapa's ambition, but the precision of his vision. Engineers diverted rivers to create shimmering moats at the base, while laborers hauled bricks and mortar up vertiginous paths to construct gardens in the sky. The entrance, once flanked by a colossal lion statue whose paws still remain, was a psychological gambit. Visitors would pass through the beast's jaws, a reminder that they entered at the king's mercy. Yet for all its grandeur, Sigeria's glory lasted barely 2 decades. Kashyapa's brother, the rightful heir he'd usurped, returned with an army. The king, trapped in his own creation, chose death by his own sword rather than surrender. The fortress, stripped of its purpose, faded into obscurity, reclaimed by jungle and time. Today, Sigeria whispers a paradox. Its walls bear graffiti from centuries of pilgrims marveling at its artistry, yet no one sought to restore it as a seat of power. Perhaps that's the point. The rock's sheer sides, meant to deter invaders, also made it impossible to adapt. Unlike castles that evolved with the ages, Sigeria remained frozen, a monument to a single man's hubris. Modern archaeologists have uncovered advanced hydraulic systems and mirrored halls that once dazzled visitors, but these innovations couldn't outpace the king's downfall. Climbing Sigeria now, one feels the weight of its duality. The frescoes of celestial maidens still glow with vibrant hues, their smiles untouched by the centuries. Yet the wind howls through empty courtyards where courtiers once plotted. It's a place that begs the question, does security built on fear ever truly last? Cassiopeia's fortress stands as a warning that the walls we build to protect ourselves can become the very barriers that isolate us. In the end, Sigeria's greatest lesson isn't in its stones, but in the silence that followed. A kingdom isn't lost when its walls fall, but when its story is reduced to a footnote, waiting for someone to climb high enough to hear it again. Off the coast of modern-day Gujarat, where the Arabian Sea churns against golden shores, whispers linger of a kingdom swallowed by the tides. Dwarka, the celestial city of Lord Krishna, was said to be a marvel of its age, with towering gates of silver and streets paved with emeralds. Ancient texts describe it as a hub of prosperity and divine power, until the day Krishna departed the earth and the ocean rose to claim it. Unlike Atlantis, whose fate was framed as punishment, Dwarka's submergence carries a different weight. Here, the waves weren't just an act of destruction, but a return, a reminder that all things, even the grandest cities, must one day yield to the cycles of creation and dissolution. For centuries, Dwarka existed as pure myth, a parable about impermanence. Then, in the late 20th century, marine archaeologists began pulling strange artifacts from the seabed: pottery shards, stone anchors, even the remnants of a sprawling settlement. Carbon dating placed these finds at 3,500 years old, aligning eerily with the traditional timeline of Krishna's legend. The discoveries ignited a firestorm of debate. Were these fragments proof of Dwarka's existence, or merely remnants of an unrelated port city? Science and faith collided in the silt, each side interpreting the same evidence through vastly different lenses. What makes Dwarka's paradox so compelling is its duality. For believers, every recovered artifact is a thread connecting scripture to history, validating millennia of oral tradition. For skeptics, the sunken ruins are a cautionary tale about confirmation bias, how easily we project our hopes onto ambiguous findings. Yet both perspectives overlook something deeper. Dwarka's power lies not in whether it was real, but in why its story endures. The city's drowning mirrors universal human anxieties: the fear of losing what we cherish, the inevitability of change, the tension between progress and surrender. Modern expeditions continue to probe the depths, uncovering submerged walls and structures that hint at sophisticated urban planning. But the true revelation isn't in the stones, it's in the way Dwarka challenges our definitions of lost. A city designed to vanish might leave physical traces, yet its meaning remains fluid, reshaped by each generation that seeks it. Hindu pilgrims still flock to the coastline, tossing flowers into the waves as offerings. Scientists map the seafloor with sonar, chasing data. Both are chasing the same ghost, a place that exists at the intersection of memory and longing. Perhaps that's the lesson hidden in Dwarka's tides. Some cities aren't meant to be found, only remembered. Their value isn't in their bricks, but in the questions they force us to ask about history, about belief, and about the stories we choose to carry forward. As the ocean keeps its secrets, we're left to wonder, Is the past ever truly gone, or does it simply wait beneath the surface, ready to resurface when we're prepared to listen? Far to the north, beyond the howling winds and frozen wastes, the ancient Greeks whispered of a land untouched by sorrow, Hyperborea. It wasn't just a city, but an entire realm bathed in perpetual sunlight, where sickness and old age held no power. The poets sang of golden fields where Apollo himself wintered, where music floated on the air like perfume, and where no one knew war or hunger. But here's the twist: Hyperborea wasn't lost. It was never meant to be found. The myth declared it inaccessible to ordinary mortals, a paradise reserved for the gods' favored few. This wasn't a challenge, it was a boundary. And yet for centuries that boundary only made the dream burn brighter. The allure of Hyperborea lies in its impossible promise. Unlike Atlantis or El Dorado, which teased explorers with physical clues, this was a utopia defined by its very unreachability. Pindar, the ancient Greek lyricist, wrote that no ship or footpath could lead there, only the gods could grant passage. But tell humans something is forbidden, and watch what happens. Medieval cartographers tucked it into the edges of their maps, labeling it terra incognita. Renaissance scholars debated its location, some placing it in Scandinavia, others in the distant Arctic. Even the Nazis, with their twisted obsession with Aryan origins, sent expeditions to Iceland and Greenland, convinced Hyperborea was the ancestral homeland of a master race. What's fascinating isn't just the myth itself, but the layers of meaning we've piled onto it over time. Hyperborea began as a poetic metaphor, a way to explore the limits of human happiness. But as civilizations rose and fell, the story morphed into something more dangerous, a blank canvas for ideology. For the Greeks, it was a mirror held up to their own society, a reminder of what they lacked. For the Nazis, it became a tool of propaganda, a pseudo-historical justification for supremacy. The paradox is stark. A place conceived as a sanctuary from human flaws became a weapon for our worst impulses. Modern science, of course, has stripped the Arctic of its mysteries. Satellites map every glacier, submarines chart the seafloor, and yet the idea persists. You'll find Hyperborea lurking in fantasy novels, video games, even New Age retreats promising spiritual awakening. Why? Because it taps into something primal, our longing for a world unspoiled by the compromises of reality. The irony is delicious. The myth endures not despite its impossibility, but because of it. Hyperborea's power isn't in its geography, but in its function as a cultural pressure valve. When the weight of the world grows too heavy, we imagine a place where that weight doesn't exist. Perhaps the most telling detail lies in the name itself. Hyperborea translates to beyond the north wind, not a location but a direction, not a destination but a journey without end. That's the real lesson here. Utopias aren't places, they're excuses to keep moving, to keep searching, even when we know the search is futile. Every era reinvents Hyperborea in its own image, proving that the greatest myths aren't about the past, they're about the future we're too afraid to stop chasing. At the southern tip of the Americas, where the Andes crumble into icy fjords and the wind screams like a banshee, there's a story whispered among the Mapuche people and etched into the journals of desperate explorers, the city of the Caesars. Unlike the golden fantasies of El Dorado or the sunken grandeur of Atlantis, this legend is rooted in something far more human: survival. The tale begins with a shipwreck in the 1500s, a group of Spanish sailors and indigenous allies stranded in the brutal wilds of Patagonia. Facing certain death, they supposedly built a refuge high in the mountains, a place so rich in gold and gems that its streets glittered under the southern stars. But here's the twist. The city wasn't just hidden by chance, it was designed to stay that way. The survivors, so the story goes, learned from the land's original inhabitants, blending European masonry with indigenous knowledge to create a fortress invisible to outsiders. Walls blended seamlessly into cliff faces, smoke from fires dissipated into mist, and pathways doubled back on themselves like tangled threads. This wasn't just a city, it was an illusion, a collective act of defiance against the very empire that had abandoned them. And yet, the irony is thick enough to taste. The legend of their sanctuary spread like wildfire, drawing wave after wave of conquistadors, treasure hunters, and even Jesuit priests into the wilderness, all convinced they could succeed where others had failed. For 300 years, expeditions vanished into Patagonia's labyrinth of glaciers and forests, lured by rumors of a metropolis where the survivors' descendants still walked its golden streets. Some searchers returned with wild tales, a city that appeared only at dawn, or a king who ruled over a people untouched by time. Others simply vanished, their bones left to bleach in the wind. The more the land resisted, the more the myth grew, fed by the colonial machine it was meant to escape. What makes the city of the Caesars so haunting isn't just its elusiveness, but what it reveals about the psychology of conquest. The Spanish Empire, which had spent centuries extracting wealth from the Americas, suddenly found itself obsessed with a treasure it couldn't take. The city became a taunt, a reminder that not everything could be claimed. Indigenous oral traditions added another layer, speaking of a place where the earth itself protected its people, where rivers changed course to mislead invaders and mountains shifted like sentinels. Modern historians debate whether the city was ever more than a mirage, a coping mechanism for stranded sailors, or a political allegory for resistance. But the truth might be simpler and far more profound. The city of the Caesars endures because it's a story about stories, a legend that outlasted the empire that spawned it. Every failed expedition, every whispered account, every map marked with "Here be dragons" added another stitch to its tapestry. Today, as satellite imagery strips the world of its mysteries, the city's legacy lingers. It's a cautionary tale about the cost of obsession, a mirror held up to colonialism's insatiable hunger. But it's also something rarer, a myth where the treasure isn't gold, but the idea that some things, some places, some truths are meant to stay hidden. The real wealth of the city of the Caesars isn't in its imagined jewels, but in the way it forces us to ask, what do we lose when every corner of the world is mapped and mastered? Sometimes the greatest gift a story can give is the permission to wonder. Beneath the churning waves off Cornwall's rugged coast, where the Atlantic gnaws at the cliffs of Land's End, lies a kingdom swallowed by the sea. Lyonesse wasn't just a city, it was an entire realm, a land of rolling hills and bustling ports, home to knights and poets, now reduced to a whisper in the wind. Celtic legends speak of its sudden demise, a single night of roaring tides and shattered cliffs that dragged the kingdom into the depths, leaving only the tips of its highest towers visible at low tide. But here's the twist: Lyonesse's drowning wasn't just a tragedy, it was a transformation. The very waters that erased it from the map immortalized it in myth, ensuring its story would never truly die. This kingdom's grip on our imagination comes from its haunting duality. On one hand, Lyonesse is a cautionary tale about nature's indifference, a reminder that even the mightiest civilizations are no match for the sea's hunger. On the other, it's a testament to the resilience of memory. Unlike Atlantis, which Plato framed as a moral lesson, or El Dorado, born from greed, Lyonesse lives on as something more intimate, a local legend woven into the fabric of Cornish identity. Fishermen still point to patches of turbulent water, calling them the footsteps of Lyonesse, while storms are said to carry the echoes of its church bells from beneath the waves. The Arthurian connection deepens the mystery. Some versions of the legend name Lyonesse as the homeland of Tristan, the tragic knight whose love story echoed through medieval romances. Tennyson, in his poem Idylls of the King, painted it as a place of twilight beauty, a land suspended between reality and dream. But what's fascinating isn't just the myth itself, it's how it mirrors real geological history. Scientists confirm that rising sea levels around 8,000 years ago did drown vast stretches of coastal Europe, including a landmass that once linked Britain to the continent. Lyonesse, then, might be a rare case where folklore and geology shake hands, where oral tradition preserves a truth older than written history. Modern retellings, from fantasy novels to folk songs, keep the kingdom alive, but they all grapple with the same question: why does a sunken city from a minor Celtic legend resonate so deeply? The answer lies in the power of absence. Lyonesse isn't just a lost place, it's a blank canvas. For poets, it's a metaphor for lost love. For environmentalists, a warning of rising seas. For locals, a source of pride in their landscape's hidden depths. Its streets may be gone, but its legacy is buoyant, bobbing to the surface whenever we need a story about the fragility of human endeavor and the strange immortality of what we leave behind. Perhaps that's the real magic of Lyonesse. It wasn't designed to vanish, yet its accidental disappearance gave it something no standing city could claim: the gift of endless reinvention. Every generation that dredges up its name adds another layer to its myth, turning a drowned kingdom into a mirror for our own fears and longings. The next time you stand on a windswept shore, listen closely. The waves might just be whispering the oldest lesson of all, that some things are never truly lost, only waiting to be remembered differently. Deep in the emerald heart of Honduras, where the Mosquisha rainforest stretches its tangled arms over forgotten rivers, there's a name that has taunted explorers for 500 years: La Ciudad Blanca, the White City. Conquistadors wrote of glimpsing its pale towers through the canopy, a metropolis so grand its streets were paved with gold. Indigenous tribes spoke of it in hushed tones, calling it the city of the monkey god, a place guarded by spirits and cursed to remain hidden. For generations, it was dismissed as just another colonial fantasy, another El Dorado spun from greed and wishful thinking. But then, in 2012, something extraordinary happened. A team of archaeologists armed with LiDAR, a laser mapping technology that peels back the jungle's veil, found something that shouldn't exist: the sprawling ruins of a lost civilization. The discovery was staggering. Beneath the dense foliage, LiDAR revealed plazas, pyramids, and terraces spanning miles. A network of urban planning so sophisticated, it rivaled the Maya. But here's the paradox: this city wasn't just lost, it was designed to disappear. Unlike Rome or Athens, built to proclaim their glory, the White City's builders chose isolation, retreating into the rainforest's embrace. They left no written records, no carvings boasting of kings or conquests. Their legacy was silence, and yet their refusal to be remembered only made them more unforgettable. What makes this story so compelling isn't just the technology that uncovered it, but what the city reveals about our relationship with the past. For centuries, we've assumed lost cities were accidents of time, places ravaged by war or natural disaster. But the White City suggests another possibility, that some civilizations chose oblivion. The indigenous Pech and Tawaka peoples, who have long served as the rainforest's guardians, speak of ancestors who fled into the wilderness to escape slavery and disease. Could the White City have been their sanctuary, a refuge so carefully hidden it became legend? The implications ripple far beyond Honduras. If a civilization could vanish so completely, what else might we be missing? The Amazon, the Congo, the deserts of Arabia, how many other societies deliberately erased themselves from history. The White City forces us to confront a humbling truth, that the past isn't a puzzle waiting to be solved, but a conversation. Every pochard, every overgrown stairway is a voice saying, "We were here, but not for you." Now, as archaeologists painstakingly uncover the city's secrets, they face an ethical tightrope. To study the White City is to risk destroying the very thing that preserved it, its isolation. The rainforest, with its venomous snakes and relentless humidity, has been its greatest protector. The moment the outside world arrives with chainsaws and cameras, the spell is broken. Perhaps that's the final lesson of this enigmatic place. Some treasures aren't meant to be owned, only wondered at. The White City endures not because it was found, but because even now it refuses to be fully known. In the endless dunes of the Arabian Peninsula, where the wind sculpts the sand into waves as high as mountains, there once stood a city so magnificent, its towers cast shadows across the desert Iram of the pillars. The Quran tells of a people led by King Shaddad, who grew so drunk on their own wealth and power that they defied divine warnings, building palaces with spires that scraped the sky in mockery of heaven itself. Their punishment was swift and absolute. Overnight, the sands rose like a tide, swallowing Iram whole, leaving no trace but the echo of its name in the wind. What makes this story so chilling isn't just the scale of its destruction, but the precision of its erasure. Iram wasn't merely lost, it was unmade, designed to vanish as completely as a mirage under the midday sun. For centuries, scholars and adventurers have scoured the deserts of Oman and Yemen, following clues as fragile as a half-remembered dream. T.E. Lawrence of Arabia himself, wrote of stumbling upon ruins that might have been Iram's bones, only to lose them again in the shifting sands. Modern archaeologists, armed with satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar, have uncovered ancient trade routes and lost oases, but the city itself remains stubbornly out of reach. The harder we search, the more Iram seems to retreat into legend, as if the desert itself is guarding its secret. Yet the paradox of Iram lies not in its absence, but in its persistence. Unlike other lost cities whose allure is tied to treasure or mystery, Iram endures as something far more potent, a parable. The Quran's telling frames it as a warning against hubris, a reminder that no amount of gold or grandeur can shield arrogance from reckoning. But the story resonates differently depending on who's listening. To medieval Islamic scholars, it was a lesson in divine justice. To Victorian explorers, it became a romantic challenge, a siren call to test their mettle against the desert's indifference. Today, in an age of climate crises and crumbling empires, Iram's fate feels uncomfortably familiar, a mirror held up to our own fragile civilizations. What's fascinating is how the legend bends to fit our fears. Some versions claim the city wasn't destroyed, but hidden, its people frozen in time beneath the dunes, waiting for the day humanity proves worthy of their return. Others whisper that the pillars still stand, buried so deep that no shovel will ever reach them. The truth, as always, is likely simpler and far more profound. Iram's power doesn't come from its physical remnants, but from the questions it forces us to ask. How much of our own world is built on arrogance? What survives when the sands of time shift? The desert, with its endless capacity for reinvention, offers the perfect metaphor. Just as the wind erases footprints within hours, history has a way of smoothing over even the grandest monuments. Iram's greatest lesson might be this: civilizations aren't remembered for their wealth or their walls, but for the stories they leave behind. And sometimes the most enduring story is one of humility, a city that chose to vanish so its warning would never fade. On the banks of the Mississippi River, where the states of Illinois and Missouri now meet, the earth rises in strange, silent waves. These are the mounds of Cahokia, once the beating heart of a civilization that rivaled any in medieval Europe. At its peak around the year 1050, this sprawling metropolis boasted a population of 20,000 people, its skyline dominated by a colossal earthen pyramid known as Monk's Mound, larger at its base than Egypt's Great Pyramid. Cahokia was a city of grand plazas, celestial observatories, and intricate trade networks stretching from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. Yet by the year 1400, its streets stood empty, its temples abandoned, its story erased so completely that later European settlers assumed the mounds were natural formations. The question isn't just why Cahokia fell, but how a place so monumental could vanish from memory so utterly. The mystery deepens when you consider Cahokia wasn't some fragile outpost, it was engineered to endure. Its builders shaped the land itself, moving 55 million cubic feet of earth by hand to create pyramids, terraces, and defensive walls. They designed neighborhoods with mathematical precision, aligning structures with the movements of the sun and moon. This was a society that understood permanence, yet left behind no written records, no oral histories explaining their departure. Archaeologists have pieced together clues like detectives at a centuries-old crime scene. Tree ring data reveals a series of devastating droughts in the 1300s, coinciding with evidence of social unrest. Skeletal remains show signs of malnutrition and violence. But these are pieces of a puzzle we're still assembling. What makes Cahokia's disappearance so unsettling is its abruptness. Unlike Rome's slow decline or the Mayas' staggered collapse, Cahokia seems to have emptied within a generation. The most haunting theory that the city's downfall was self-inflicted. Some researchers point to the discovery of mass graves not from warfare but from ritual sacrifices. Dozens of young women were buried simultaneously, their bodies arranged with care. Was this a desperate attempt to appease gods who'd withheld the rains? Or the final act of a society that had lost faith in its own foundations? The truth may lie in Cahokia's greatest innovation, its ability to unite diverse peoples under a shared vision. When that vision fractured, the social contract dissolved. Yet the real paradox isn't Cahokia's fall, but its afterlife. While the city faded from history, its influence rippled across the continent. The Mississippian culture it spawned built similar mounds from Wisconsin to Louisiana, echoing Cahokia's architectural language. Even today, its legacy lingers in unexpected places. Modern city planners study its flood-resistant earthworks, while indigenous activists reclaim its history as proof of pre-colonial sophistication. Cahokia's silence speaks volumes about how civilizations are remembered. We celebrate the pyramids of Egypt and the Colosseum of Rome, but a city built from soil, the humblest of materials, somehow slipped through the cracks of history. Perhaps that's the lesson buried in these grassy mounds. Cahokia's builders understood something we've forgotten. That permanence isn't about stone or steel, but the stories we choose to tell. Their city may be gone, but every time someone stands atop Monk's Mound, tracing the outline of a forgotten metropolis in the landscape below, Cahokia lives again, not as a ruin but as a reminder. Even the grandest human achievements are fleeting, yet in their passing they leave echoes that never fully fade. Beneath the sun-baked plains of Cappadocia, where the landscape looks like something from another world with its towering rock formations and fairy chimneys, lies a secret that defies belief. Derinkuyu. This isn't just an underground city, it's an entire civilization carved into the earth, a labyrinth of tunnels, chambers, and ventilation shafts stretching 18 levels deep, capable of sheltering 20,000 people for months at a time. The sheer scale is staggering, but what's truly mind-bending is the precision of its design. Derinkuyu wasn't just dug haphazardly. It was engineered with the foresight of a society that knew it might need to vanish at a moment's notice. The city's existence speaks to a primal human instinct, the will to survive against impossible odds. Built by the Phrygians around the 8th century BCE and later expanded by early Christians, Derinkuyu was a response to relentless waves of invaders: Persians, Mongols, Arab armies, all sweeping across Anatolia like storms. But here's the genius of its construction. Every detail was calculated for invisibility and self-sufficiency. Massive circular stone doors weighing up to half a ton could seal off entire sections from the inside. Vertical shafts acted as natural air conditioning, circulating fresh air from the surface to the deepest chambers. Wells tapped into underground rivers, ensuring a steady water supply even during sieges. And the rock itself, soft volcanic tuff, was easy to carve but hardened when exposed to air, creating walls that stood the test of centuries. Yet the most haunting question isn't how Derinkuyu was built, but why it was abandoned. Unlike cities ravaged by war or natural disaster, this one shows no signs of violent destruction. Instead, it seems to have been quietly vacated, its doors left ajar, its kitchen still bearing traces of last meals. Some historians point to the rise of more stable empires in the region, making such refuges obsolete. Others speculate that the very secrecy that protected Derinkuyu also doomed it. Without a living memory of its location, it faded into myth until a local farmer stumbled upon it in 1963 while renovating his home. What makes Derinkuyu resonate today isn't just its engineering marvels, but the uncomfortable parallels it draws with our own world. In an age of climate crises and geopolitical instability, the idea of a hidden sanctuary feels less like ancient history and more like a survival manual. Modern architects study its ventilation systems for insights into sustainable design, while historians see it as a testament to collective resilience, proof that when faced with existential threats, humans don't just endure, they innovate. But perhaps the real lesson of Derinkuyu lies in its silence. This was a city built to leave no trace, to guard its secrets so well that even its abandonment became part of its design. Walking its dimly lit passages now, you can't help but wonder how many other Derinkayas are still out there waiting beneath our feet, their stories buried but not forgotten. The answer, like the city itself, remains just out of reach, a reminder that some truths are meant to stay hidden until the world is ready to hear them. The Norse sagas tell of a land so rich, its very name sings of bounty. Vinland, the place where wild grapes grew thick as fur on the forest floor, where rivers teemed with fish and meadows stretched endlessly under clear skies. When Leif Erikson and his crew first sighted these shores around the year 1000, they must have felt the weight of destiny. Here was a land unclaimed, untouched, a continent waiting to be woven into Viking legend. Yet Vinland's story is steeped in paradox, a colony built to last, only to be abandoned within a generation, its existence fading into myth until a single archaeological discovery in the 1960s shattered centuries of doubt. At Elant's Ox Meadows on Newfoundland's windswept northern tip, archaeologists uncovered the ghostly outlines of Norse sod houses, a forge still blackened by ancient fires, and a single bronze cloak pin, tiny, personal, undeniable. This was proof that Vikings had crossed the Atlantic 5 centuries before Columbus, rewriting history with every excavated artifact. But the site raises more questions than it answers. The sagas speak of multiple settlements, of trade with indigenous peoples they called Skraelings, even of violent clashes. Yet Elant's Ox Meadows appears to have been a temporary base, a way station for explorers rather than a true colony. So where was the real Vinland? The answer may lie in the sagas themselves, those poetic chronicles blending fact and folklore. They describe a land of mild winters and fertile soil, details that don't quite match Newfoundland's harsh climate. Could Vinland have stretched further south, down the coasts of Nova Scotia or even New England, where wild grapes do grow? Some researchers point to butternuts found at Eland's Ox Meadows, a tree species native to regions hundreds of miles southwest. Others scour satellite images for hints of lost Norse structures buried beneath forests or farmland. The tantalizing possibility remains that Vinland was never a single place, but a mosaic of fleeting footholds, each abandoned as quickly as they were established. Why then did the Vikings turn their backs on such promise? The sagas hint at the answer. Conflict with indigenous tribes made survival precarious, while the sheer distance from Greenland and Iceland strained supply lines. But perhaps the deepest truth is this: the Norse weren't conquerors in the mold of later European empires. They were pragmatists, willing to explore but unwilling to wage endless war for distant soil. Vinland offered wealth, but not enough to justify the cost, and so they left, taking only stories with them, stories so vivid they kept the dream alive for 1,000 years. Today, Vinland stands as a mirror to our own restless spirit. It reminds us that discovery isn't just about planting flags or claiming land, but about the courage to venture into the unknown, even if you can't stay. The Vikings didn't just find a new world, they proved it existed, leaving a breadcrumb trail of clues for future generations to follow. And in that, Vinland's legacy endures, not as a lost colony, but as a beacon, calling us to look beyond the horizon and wonder what else might be waiting, half buried, just out of sight. The Sahara stretches endlessly, a sea of sand where the horizon shimmers like a promise. Among its shifting dunes, whispered for centuries, lies the legend of Zerzura, the White City. Bedouin storytellers spoke of walls as pale as bone, gates adorned with emeralds, and streets silent except for the song of a solitary bird. It was a place you couldn't find by searching, they said, only by fate. When European explorers caught wind of these tales in the 19th century, their obsession ignited. Men like Laszlo Olmosy, the real-life inspiration for the English patient, mapped their lives around the hunt, convinced Zerzura was the key to unlocking Africa's secrets. But the harder they pursued it, the more the city seemed to dissolve into the desert's breath. Here's the twist: Zerzura wasn't just hidden, it was designed to defy discovery. Unlike Troy or Machu Picchu, which left physical traces, this city existed in the negative space between myth and mirage. Bedouin oral traditions described it as a test, a place that revealed itself only to those pure of heart or broken by thirst. European diaries, meanwhile, painted it as a prize, a blank spot on the map waiting to be claimed. The clash between these perspectives is telling. For the Sahara's nomadic peoples, Zerzura was a metaphor, the idea that some truths aren't meant to be owned. For outsiders, it was a challenge, proof that no land could resist conquest. The irony: Zerzura's legend shaped reality more than any physical city ever could. Olmosy's failed expeditions led to the mapping of ancient trade routes. The search for its fabled treasures unearthed prehistoric cave art instead. Even the name became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Early 20th century aviators, disoriented by sandstorms, would radio frantic reports of seeing Zerzura from the air, only for the coordinates to lead to empty dunes. The city's greatest trick wasn't hiding, it was making people believe it could be found. Modern satellite imagery has stripped the Sahara of its cartographic mysteries, yet Zerzura endures. Scholars now suggest the tale might have roots in real oases swallowed by desertification, their memory preserved in oral tradition, but that explanation feels almost too small. What gives the legend its power isn't geology, it's psychology. Zerzura mirrors our relationship with the unknown, the way we project meaning onto emptiness. Every generation reinvents it, a lost utopia for romantics, a metaphor for unattainable goals for pragmatists, even a namesake for Martian craters by astronomers dreaming beyond Earth. The Sahara guards its secrets well, but Zerzura's true lesson isn't about what's hidden. It's about why we keep looking. In a world where every inch of the globe is mapped and monetized, the idea of a place that refuses to be pinned down is intoxicating. Perhaps that's why the legend still whispers to us, not to lead us to treasure, but to remind us that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only carried, like a compass pointing forever toward the next horizon. Off the coast of Yonaguni, Japan's westernmost island, the ocean floor holds a riddle carved in stone, towering terraces, sharp angles, and what appear to be staircases descend into the deep, a submerged spectacle that looks eerily like the ruins of an ancient city. Discovered by a local diver in 1986, the Yonaguni monument has sparked a debate that cuts to the heart of how we understand the past. Are these formations the work of nature's patient hand, or proof of a civilization swallowed by the sea 12,000 years ago? The answer depends on who you ask, and that's where the mystery takes on a life of its own. Geologists point to the region's active tectonic shifts, explaining how sandstone fractures along natural plains, creating angular platforms that mimic human design. The monument's most famous feature, a massive rectangular block nicknamed the Turtle, could simply be a fluke of erosion shaped by currents over millennia. But then there are the details that defy easy explanation. What appear to be carved channels, symmetrical indentations resembling tool marks, and even a relief that some interpret as a human face. Marine archaeologists counter that nature rarely produces such precise geometry, especially in concentrated clusters. The controversy isn't just academic, it's a collision of worldviews. If Yonaguni is artificial, it would rewrite history, suggesting advanced cultures thrived during the last ice age, long before traditional timelines allow. The paradox lies in the monument's elusiveness. Unlike sunken ports like Alexandria or Dwarka, which fit neatly into known historical narratives, Yonaguni exists outside the box. No pottery shards or tools have been found nearby, no legends speak of its builders. It's a ghost of a city, defined entirely by its absence of context. And yet, this very ambiguity is what keeps researchers returning. Dive teams have mapped the site with three-dimensional sonar, while historians scour Okinawan folklore for whispers of a land that sank. The most compelling theory bridges both sides, that natural formations were later modified by humans, a sacred site enhanced rather than built from scratch. What makes Yonaguni unforgettable isn't just the question of its origin, but what it reveals about our hunger for discovery. The human eye is wired to find patterns, to see faces in clouds and castles in cliffs. In an age where satellites have mapped every inch of the globe, places like this remind us that the past still holds pockets of wonder, spaces where history and imagination share the same waters. Whether a geological marvel or a lost chapter of humanity, Yonaguni's greatest gift is the way it forces us to sit with uncertainty, to marvel at the fact that, even now, the ocean keeps secrets we may never fully unravel. In the heart of the Sahara, where the Niger River bends like a question mark, lies a city built on secrets, Timbuktu. For centuries, this desert crossroads was whispered about in Europe as a place of unimaginable wealth, a fabled El Dorado of gold and spices. But the real treasure of Timbuktu wasn't mined from the earth, it was written on paper. hidden in plain sight, tucked away in chests, buried in sand, or sealed within the walls of mud brick homes, were hundreds of thousands of manuscripts, some dating back to the 12th century. These weren't just religious texts or royal decrees, but works of astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and philosophy, proof of a scholarly tradition that flourished while Europe was still clawing its way out of the Dark Ages. The story of Timbuktu's libraries is one of defiance. When invaders threatened whether Moroccan armies in the 16th century or extremist groups in the 21st, families and scholars didn't flee with gold or jewels. They smuggled books, pages were sewn into clothing, tucked into baskets of grain, or carried by donkey into the desert's embrace. One librarian famously disguised his entire collection as vegetables, stacking manuscripts beneath leafy greens in a cart. This wasn't just preservation, it was an act of quiet rebellion, a refusal to let ignorance erase the legacy of a civilization that once made Timbuktu the Oxford of Africa. What's staggering isn't just the volume of these texts, but their diversity. A single manuscript might contain a treatise on optics alongside poetry, or a detailed map of the stars next to a recipe for ink. One 14th century document outlines the symptoms of tuberculosis with startling accuracy, while another debates the ethics of trade centuries before Adam Smith. These weren't static relics but living documents annotated and debated by generations of scholars. The margins tell their own story, notes in Arabic, Hebrew, and Old Sonic, proof of an intellectual crossroads where ideas flowed as freely as the Niger's waters. Yet the paradox of Timbuktu's treasure is this: the very secrecy that saved it also kept it from the world. For hundreds of years, these manuscripts were family heirlooms, guarded like sacred trust. Only in the last few decades, as digitization projects and new libraries like the Ahmed Baba Institute have risen, has their full scope come to light. Now, a new challenge emerges: how to share this knowledge without diluting its power. Local archivists train in restoration techniques, painstakingly repairing pages gnawed by termites or brittle with age. Scholars debate whether to lock manuscripts away in climate-controlled vaults or let them remain in the homes where they've survived for centuries. Timbuktu's lesson isn't just about the past, but the future. In an era where data can vanish with a keystroke, these manuscripts remind us that preservation isn't passive, it's a choice, often made by ordinary people who understand that ideas outlive empires. The librarians of Timbuktu could have burned their collections for warmth or sold them for survival. Instead, they chose to become invisible guardians of something larger than themselves. Their legacy whispers a truth we're still learning: that the greatest civilizations aren't measured by the monuments they build, but by the stories they refuse to let die. The jungle doesn't reclaim land, it remembers it. Nowhere is this more evident than in the heart of Cambodia, where the ruins of Angkor rise like a dream half forgotten. This wasn't just a city, it was a mirror held up to the heavens, its temples designed as celestial maps in stone. Angkor Wat, the crown jewel of the empire, stretches across the landscape with its 5 towers echoing the peaks of Mount Meru, the mythical home of Hindu gods. Every corridor, every carving was a deliberate act of devotion, an attempt to etch divinity into the earth itself. Yet today, those same corridors are strangled by the roots of silk cotton trees, their grip so tight it's as if the jungle is whispering, nothing lasts forever. What's haunting about Angkor isn't just its scale, though at its peak, it dwarfed medieval Paris, but the precision of its abandonment. Unlike cities ravaged by war or natural disaster, Angkor's decline was slow, almost deliberate. Historians trace its unraveling to the 15th century, when a perfect storm of environmental strain and political upheaval tipped the balance. The Khmer Empire had transformed the landscape into a hydraulic masterpiece, with canals and reservoirs so advanced they could support 1 million people. But climate records reveal a series of punishing droughts followed by monsoons so violent they breached these carefully engineered systems. The land, pushed to its limits, began to push back. Yet here's the twist: Angkor never truly died. Long after the capital shifted south, the temples remained pilgrimage sites for Buddhist monks, their original Hindu iconography quietly reinterpreted. The jungle did more than consume. It preserved, its dense canopy shielding intricate carvings from centuries of tropical sun and rain. Even the famous Tarprom temple, with its serpentine roots swallowing doorways, isn't just a roue, and it's a collaboration between human ambition and nature's patience, a testament to the way endings can become beginnings. Modern archaeologists armed with LiDAR technology have peeled back the jungle's veil, revealing a metropolis far grander than anyone imagined. Gridded streets, suburban sprawl, even neighborhoods specialized by trade, all hidden beneath the green. This discovery upends the old narrative of a sudden collapse. Instead, Angkor seems to have faded like a slow sunset, its people adapting rather than vanishing. Some scholars argue the city's fall was less a catastrophe and more a transformation, as the Khmer redefined their relationship with the land and their gods. Angkor's paradox lingers in every moss-covered stone. A city built to outlast time now stands as a monument to impermanence. Its endurance isn't in the gold that once adorned its towers, but in the questions it forces us to ask. What does it mean for a civilization to end? Can a place be forgotten if its story keeps evolving? The tourists who flock to Angkor Wat at dawn aren't just witnessing a relic, they're stepping into a conversation that's been unfolding for 1,000 years, one where even the cracks in the stone have something to say. Beneath our feet, according to ancient whispers, lies a realm untouched by time, Agartha, the legendary kingdom hidden deep within the earth. Unlike lost cities swallowed by jungle or sea, Agartha was never meant to be found. Its very existence hinges on secrecy, a sanctuary for enlightened beings who have retreated from the surface world's chaos. Tibetan Buddhist texts speak of Shambhala, a spiritual stronghold accessible only through hidden tunnels in the Himalayas. But when this concept migrated westward in the 19th century, it morphed into something stranger, a hollow earth teeming with advanced technology, bathed in the glow of an inner sun, and ruled by a race of superhuman beings. The irony is as rich as the myth itself. A place designed to remain beyond reach has become one of history's most enduring obsessions. What makes Agartha so tantalizing isn't just its impossibility, but its adaptability. Every culture that embraced the legend reshaped it to fit their anxieties and aspirations. For mystics like Madame Blavatsky, founder of Theosophy, Agartha was a repository of ancient wisdom, a place where masters of esoteric knowledge guarded secrets of the universe. For Nazi occultists like Heinrich Himmler, it became a twisted fantasy, an Aryan utopia where the pure ancestors of the Third Reich awaited their call to glory. Even science fiction couldn't resist. Jules Verne's journey to the center of the earth and modern films like Godzilla vs. Kong have repackaged Agartha as a land of prehistoric marvels and futuristic wonders. The myth refuses to die because it's a mirror reflecting whatever we project onto it. The most compelling twist, Agartha's legend thrives precisely because it can't be disproven. Unlike Atlantis or El Dorado, which leave archaeologists hunting for physical evidence, a subterranean kingdom is shielded by geology itself. No shovel can dig deep enough, no satellite can penetrate the crust. This impenetrability makes Agartha the ultimate Rorschach test for human curiosity. When hollow earth theorists point to entrances like the North Pole or caves in the Andes, They're not just chasing a place. They're chasing the idea that the world still holds mysteries too vast for textbooks. Yet Agartha's true power lies in its paradox. A refuge meant to exclude outsiders has become a beacon for them, drawing everyone from New Age pilgrims to conspiracy theorists. The very act of searching for it defies its purpose, turning a sanctuary into a spectacle. Perhaps that's the lesson woven into this subterranean tapestry, that our hunger for the hidden is insatiable, and the greatest myths aren't those we solve, but those we keep alive through the sheer force of our wonder. In the end, Agartha isn't a city at all, it's a question. What would we become if we ever stopped looking for the next great unknown? In the quiet fields of Sichuan, where mist curls over the rice paddies, the earth guards a secret that rewrites history. The Sanxingdui ruins aren't just an archaeological site, they're a riddle carved in bronze. Here, in 1986, farmers digging a well unearthed something that shouldn't exist, a trove of artifacts so bizarre, they seemed plucked from a sci-fi fantasy. Golden masks with angular, otherworldly features, bronze trees stretching toward the sky, their branches heavy with celestial birds, a statue of a man with bulging eyes and ears stretched long as if listening to whispers across millennia. These weren't the delicate jades or terracotta warriors of familiar ancient China. This was art that defied every convention, a visual language without a Rosetta Stone. What's startling isn't just the craftsmanship, but the cultural black hole surrounding it. The Sanxingdui civilization thrived over 3,000 years ago, rivaling the Shang dynasty, yet its name appears in no historical record. Its people left no written accounts, no chronicles of kings or battles, only these silent, staring artifacts. The paradox is haunting, a society that poured its identity into metal and gold, yet vanished so completely that even its memory was erased. Archaeologists trace its abrupt end to an earthquake or invasion, but the truth may be stranger. Some pits show signs of ritual destruction, as if the people themselves shattered their treasures before disappearing into the fog of time. The mystery deepens when you consider the artifact's singularity. Unlike Shang art, which glorified human figures and ritual vessels, Sanxingdui's creations feel alien, almost psychedelic. Their bronze technology was unparalleled, using methods lost to later dynasties. The masks, some taller than a person, weren't worn, they were displayed, perhaps as conduits to the divine. One prevailing theory suggests this was a theocracy, where rulers blurred the line between priest and king, communicating with gods through these metallic faces. But without context, we're left guessing. Were these objects offerings to appease an angry sky, portraits of ancestors, or something far stranger? Recent discoveries only multiply the questions. In 2021, new pits yielded a gold foil-wrapped staff, jade daggers, and a bronze altar so intricate, it suggests a cosmology we've yet to decipher. Each find chips away at the old narrative of Chinese civilization as a single, unbroken thread. Sanxingdui forces us to confront a messier truth. That ancient history is a mosaic of lost worlds, some so different they feel like messages from another planet. Perhaps that's why these silent relics captivate us. They're not just artifacts, they're mirrors. In their exaggerated features and cryptic symbolism, we see our own struggle to be remembered. A civilization that bent metal to its will, yet couldn't bend time. Sanxingdui's greatest lesson isn't in what it left behind, but in what it asks. How much of our own culture will survive the ages? And what will future archaeologists make of the fragments we've buried? The streets of Pompeii still whisper, but not with the voices of the living. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in the year 79, it didn't just bury a city, it pressed pause on an entire way of life. Unlike the deliberately hidden cities we've explored, Pompeii's tragedy was accidental, its preservation a cruel twist of fate. Ash and pumice rained down with such speed that residents were caught mid-step, their final moments frozen in eerie detail. A loaf of bread sits half-baked in an oven. A dog, still chained to a post, curls into itself. A couple clutches each other in a desperate embrace. This wasn't a city designed to vanish. It was a snapshot of Roman existence, sealed under volcanic rock like a letter never meant to be opened. What sets Pompeii apart isn't just its state of preservation, but what that preservation reveals. Other lost cities leave us guessing, their ruins stripped by time, their stories fragmented. But here, the past feels unnervingly present. Graffiti scrawled on tavern walls jokes about bad wine and unpaid debts. Mosaics advertise the services of brothels with cheeky clarity. Election slogans plastered on buildings prove some things never change. This level of intimacy is unparalleled in archaeology. Walking Pompeii's cobbled streets, you don't just study history, you brush shoulders with it. Yet the paradox cuts deep. The same disaster that erased Pompeii also immortalized it. Had Vesuvius remained silent, the city would have faded like countless others, its wooden structures rotting, its frescoes crumbling under centuries of renovation. Instead, the eruption acted like a time capsule, preserving even the most perishable details. Straw mats still line the floors of bathhouses. Carbonized figs rest in market stalls. A child's cradle rocks slightly, as if just abandoned. This duality, destruction as preservation, forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes, understanding the past requires its interruption. The contrast with intentionally hidden cities couldn't be starker. Where places like Derinkuyu or the White City were designed to defy discovery, Pompeii's value lies in its sheer accessibility. There's no code to crack, no jungle to penetrate. Its lessons are laid bare, offering a masterclass in Roman urban planning, social hierarchies, and daily rituals. But this accessibility comes at a cost. Other lost cities spark imagination precisely because they withhold secrets. Pompeii, by laying everything bare, reminds us of something far more unsettling: how fragile civilization really is. Modern visitors often fixate on the plaster casts of victims. Their contorted poses a stark reminder of Vesuvius's brutality. But the real revelation isn't in the tragedy, it's in the ordinary. A pot left simmering on a hearth, dice scattered across a gaming table. These mundane moments, preserved with heartbreaking clarity, underscore how quickly the line between life and oblivion can vanish. Pompeii doesn't just show us how the Romans died, it shows us how they lived, and in doing so, it holds up a mirror to our own fleeting existence. The next time you complain about traffic or glance at the clock, remember, 2,000 years from now, someone might be studying your coffee cup, wondering what your life was like, and realizing it wasn't so different from theirs. Beneath the sun-baked streets of Malta, where the Mediterranean light paints everything in gold, lies a darkness older than the pyramids. The Hypogeum of Saflieni isn't just another archaeological site. It's a labyrinth carved entirely by hand from solid limestone, a subterranean cathedral stretching 3 levels deep into the earth. Built over 5,000 years ago by a culture that left no written records, its very existence defies logic. Why would a civilization pour generations of labor into a structure meant to be invisible? The answer might lie in the walls themselves, where echoes don't just fade, they transform. Step inside, and the air hums with something beyond silence. The Hypogeum's chambers aren't random. They're precision-engineered to manipulate sound. Speak in the so-called oracle room, and your voice resonates at a frequency that vibrates through bone, creating an otherworldly effect ancient worshippers might have attributed to divine presence. Niches carved into the walls amplify whispers while muffling shouts, suggesting rituals where sound itself was sacred. Then there's the art ochre red spirals swirl across ceilings like frozen smoke, identical to motifs found in Malta's above-ground temples. But here's the twist: those temples face the sun, while the Hypogeum turns inward, rejecting light entirely. Was this a womb of the earth, a place to commune with ancestors, or something far stranger? The mystery deepens when you consider what and who was left behind. Excavations uncovered the bones of over 7,000 individuals, carefully arranged in collective burials. Some skulls bore elongated shapes, igniting wild theories about ancient head-binding practices or even otherworldly visitors. Yet the real enigma isn't in the bones themselves, but in their disappearance. Early 20th century reports mention skeletal remains with unusual features, but many were lost or discarded before modern science could analyze them. It's as if the Hypogeum refuses to surrender its secrets, teasing us with fragments before snatching them away. Abandonment adds another layer to the paradox. Around 2500 BCE, the Hypogeum's builders vanished without a trace, along with Malta's entire temple culture. No war, no environmental catastrophe explains their departure, just silence. Later civilizations used the chambers as storage or shelter, oblivious to their sacred origins. Even the Hypogeum's rediscovery in 1902 was accidental, when workers breaking ground for a housing project struck through the roof of a chamber. The more we study it, the clearer it becomes. This wasn't just a place to hide the dead, but to commune with forces we've forgotten how to name. Today, access is fiercely controlled. Humidity from visitors' breath once threatened to erase the ancient paintings, prompting strict limits on daily admissions. To stand in the Hypogeum now is to confront a chilling truth: some knowledge wasn't meant for the uninitiated. The acoustics, the art, the labyrinthine passages all point to an experience designed to overwhelm the senses, to transport participants beyond the mundane. In an age where we document everything, the Hypogeum remains stubbornly opaque, a relic from a time when mystery wasn't a puzzle to solve, but a power to wield. Perhaps that's its final lesson: not every door should be opened, and not every whisper is meant to be heard. Beneath the turquoise waters of Alexandria's harbor, where fishing boats now cast their nets, the stones of a queen's dream whisper through the silt. Cleopatra's palace, a symbol of Ptolemaic opulence and political cunning, rests in pieces, shattered by earthquakes and swallowed by the Mediterranean's relentless rise. This wasn't just a royal residence, it was the nerve center of an empire, where alliances were forged over wine-drenched feasts, where scholars from the great library debated under gilded ceilings, and where Cleopatra herself plotted to preserve Egypt's independence against Rome's encroaching shadow. Yet today, its halls are navigated not by diplomats, but by flippered archaeologists gliding past columns encrusted with sea life. The irony is as sharp as the salt water. A city designed to showcase human mastery, now humbled by nature's indifference. Recent dives have peeled back layers of sediment to reveal fragments of this drowned world. Statues of gods and queens, their faces smoothed by centuries of currents. Gold coins stamped with Cleopatra's profile, now scattered like fallen leaves. Most haunting of all, the remnants of the palace's private island, Anterodos, where marble floors still gleam under shifting sunlight. Marine archaeologists use suction tubes to gently clear debris, revealing mosaics so vibrant they seem untouched by time. But the real breakthrough isn't in the artifacts themselves, it's in the technology that uncovers them. Sonar mapping paints 3D blueprints of the submerged city, while electrolysis preserves recovered metals by reversing corrosion atom by atom. This isn't just excavation, it's time travel. The connection between Cleopatra's Alexandria and modern science runs deeper than salvage. Her city was a crossroads of knowledge where Egyptian, Greek, and Roman thinkers collided. Today, international teams, Egyptian archaeologists working alongside French geologists and American engineers, mirror that same collaborative spirit. The palace's collapse, triggered by tectonic shifts, now helps seismologists understand Mediterranean fault lines, offering clues about future earthquakes. Even the harbor's silt, packed with organic debris, serves as a climate time capsule, revealing how ancient coastal cities adapted or failed against rising seas. Cleopatra's tragedy has become a laboratory for resilience, yet the greatest paradox lies in what the palace's submersion preserved. Land-based sites crumble under looters' hands or urban sprawl, but underwater, the ruins slept undisturbed. A bronze lamp might rest where it fell the night the quake hit. A wine amphora, still sealed, waits on the seabed as if the next symposium is moments away. This isn't just a snapshot of a building, it's a freeze frame of life at civilization's precipice. The palace's stones, now home to octopuses and coral, remind us that empires aren't defeated just by armies, but by the slow, inexorable grind of the planet itself. As divers hover over a shattered sphinx, its smile cryptic beneath algae, the line between past and present blurs, Cleopatra's Alexandria whispers a warning and a wonder that the same sea which erased her world now guards its memory, and that sometimes to truly see history, we must be willing to dive into the dark. The wind howls across the empty fjords of Greenland now, but 1,000 years ago, these icy shores echoed with the sounds of Norse settlers' axes biting into timber, children laughing between turf-walled homes, church bells ringing over a community that defied the very edge of the known world. At its peak, the eastern settlement boasted nearly 3,000 souls, a Viking outpost so resilient, it weathered 400 winters in a land they optimistically called green. Yet by the mid-15th century, the last hearth had grown cold. No battle cries marked their end, no mass graves, just silence, and a mystery that gnaws at historians to this day. How could a people so adept at survival vanish without a trace? The Norse didn't stumble onto Greenland by accident. This was a deliberate gamble, orchestrated by Eric the Red after his exile from Iceland. With a marketer's flair, he painted the island as a land of opportunity, its waters teeming with walrus ivory, the white gold of medieval Europe. And for generations, the strategy worked. Settlers built stone churches like the one at H. Valsey, its walls still standing as if waiting for a congregation that never returned. They traded tusks for timber and iron with Norway, adapted Inuit hunting techniques, and even exported live polar bears as royal gifts. This wasn't a struggling colony, it was a functioning society, complete with bishops and tax records. Which makes its collapse all the more unsettling. Archaeologists sifting through the ruins find no single smoking gun, but a web of vulnerabilities. Tree rings tell of a creeping cold snap, the Little Ice Age, that shortened growing seasons and packed the fjords with impassable ice. Soil samples reveal overgrazed pastures, where Viking sheep stripped the fragile tundra faster than it could regenerate. Then there's the stubbornness factor. While the Thule Inuit thrived by hunting seals and whales, the Norse clung to their European identity, relying on livestock ill-suited to the changing climate. A single cow required enough hay to fill a longhouse, leaving no margin for error when winters grew longer. Starvation leaves subtle marks on bones, but pride leaves none. Yet climate alone doesn't explain the enigma. Excavations at Gardar, the bishop's seat, uncovered a startling clue, a fragment of a Venetian glass bead. This tiny artifact hints at a darker truth that Greenland's lifeline to Europe frayed not just from ice, but from indifference. As ivory lost value to cheaper Asian imports, and the Black Death ravaged Norway, supply ships came less frequently. The last written record from the colony is a 1407 wedding at Valsey Church. After that, only silence. Did the last Norse sail away, or did they starve huddled in their homes? The Inuit oral tradition speaks of strangers who refused to learn from the land, a cautionary tale about cultural rigidity. Greenland's empty ruins now serve as an eerie laboratory for modern climate anxieties. The Vikings didn't fail because they were weak, but because their systems were brittle, too dependent on distant trade, too slow to adapt indigenous knowledge, too convinced of their own supremacy over nature. As we face our own environmental tipping points, their story whispers a warning. Adaptation isn't just about technology, but the humility to change how we live. The Norse could have learned from the Inuit, just as we might learn from them. Instead, their legacy is a collection of crumbling stone foundations, slowly sinking into the permafrost, a monument to the most dangerous illusion of all, that any civilization is too strong to fall. From the golden mirage of El Dorado to the echoing tunnels of Derinkuyu, these hidden cities share a single, haunting thread. They were never meant to be found, yet we can't stop searching for them. That's the paradox at the heart of every lost civilization we've explored. The more fiercely a place resists discovery, the more intensely it captures our imagination. These stories aren't just about stone and treasure. They're about the human spirit's refusal to accept that anything, no matter how ancient or enigmatic, should remain beyond our reach. Take a step back and you'll notice something remarkable. Whether it's Shangri-La's promise of eternal peace or the city of the Caesar's defiance of colonial greed, each legend reflects the fears and desires of the cultures that kept them alive. They're not static myths, they evolve, bending to fit the anxieties of every new era. In medieval Europe, lost cities symbolized divine punishment or uncharted riches. Today, they've become metaphors for environmental collapse, forgotten knowledge, or even extraterrestrial contact. The stories endure because they're mirrors, showing us who we are by what we choose to seek. But here's the twist. The real magic of these places lies in their elusiveness. Imagine if archaeologists uncovered definitive proof of Atlantis' tomorrow satellite coordinates, a king's skeleton, a library of untranslated texts. The mystery would collapse under the weight of facts, and with it, the centuries of art, literature, and speculation that grew in its absence. There's a reason we're still debating the Nazca lines or the purpose of Stonehenge. Uncertainty is fertile ground. It invites us to dream, to argue, to keep searching even when the trail goes cold. That's why these cities resonate so deeply in our digital age. In a world where Google Maps can show you every inch of the planet, where satellites peer through jungle canopies and sonar scans the ocean floor, the idea that anything could still be hiding feels radical. It's a reminder that history isn't a locked vault, but a living conversation. Every generation gets to ask new questions, to reinterpret the clues, to add another layer to the story. So as we wrap up this journey, here's the challenge I'll leave you with. The next time you hear a legend about a vanished civilization, don't just ask whether it's real. Ask why it persists. What does it say about us that we're still chasing a city drowned by the Sahara's sands or a fortress swallowed by the Amazon? Maybe the answer isn't buried in some ruin. Maybe it's right here in our endless hunger for wonder. After all, the greatest discoveries aren't always the ones we dig up. They're the ones that dig into us, changing how we see the world and our place in it. Thanks for joining me on this expedition through the shadows of history. If these stories sparked your curiosity, hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives into the past, and let me know in the comments which lost city captivates you the most. Until next time, keep exploring.